The silence before death has a particular sound. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison knew this, as he pressed his back against the cold concrete wall, feeling the steady drip of his own blood mixing with the dust beneath his boots. Somewhere in the darkness above, a sniper's scope was tracking movement that could mean salvation or slaughter. What started as a routine extraction mission in the mountains of Afghanistan had become a nightmare that would test everything the Navy SEALs thought they knew about survival, brotherhood, and the thin line between heroism and horror. 8 of America's most elite warriors found themselves trapped in an abandoned compound, surrounded by an enemy that seemed to know their every move before they made it. But in the suffocating darkness of that concrete tomb, none of them could have predicted that their salvation would come from the very weapon that had been hunting them. A single rifle shot from an unknown sniper would shatter everything they believed about who was friend and who was foe, setting in motion a series of events that would change their lives forever. This is the story of how 8 men learned that sometimes the enemy of your enemy isn't your friend. Sometimes they're something far more dangerous. Sometimes they're family. The helicopter blades chopped through the thin mountain air like a mechanical heartbeat, each rotation bringing SEAL Team 6 closer to what their intelligence briefing had called a simple extraction. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison adjusted his night vision goggles and studied the faces of his 7 team members, each man lost in his own pre-mission ritual. Some checked their weapons for the 100th time. Others stared out into the darkness below, and a few closed their eyes in what might have been prayer or meditation. The target was supposed to be straightforward. Intelligence had located a high-value informant trapped in an abandoned Soviet-era compound deep in the Kunar Province mountains. The informant, codenamed Raven, claimed to have information about a planned terrorist attack on American soil. The compound had been empty for months, according to satellite imagery, and the extraction should take no more than 20 minutes from insertion to exfiltration. Morrison had been leading SEAL operations for over 12 years, and something about this mission felt wrong from the moment they received the briefing. The intelligence was too clean, too perfect. In his experience, nothing in Afghanistan ever went according to plan, especially when it seemed too easy. But orders were orders, and his team trusted him to get them home alive. As the Black Hawk approached the landing zone, Morrison keyed his radio. 2 minutes to insertion. Remember, we go in fast, grab Raven, and get out. This is not a combat mission. We avoid engagement unless absolutely necessary. His voice was calm and professional, but inside his instincts were screaming warnings he couldn't ignore. The compound sat like a concrete cancer on the mountainside, its Soviet architecture brutal and functional. 3 buildings formed a rough triangle around a central courtyard, connected by covered walkways that had once housed administrative offices and barracks. Intelligence reports showed it had been abandoned since the Soviet withdrawal in 1989, but time and weather had not been kind to the structure. Petty Officer First Class Danny Rodriguez, the team's point man, was first to fast-rope down into the landing zone. His boots hit the rocky ground with practiced silence, and he immediately took a defensive position while scanning for threats. One by one, the rest of the team followed. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Williams, the team's explosives expert, whose steady hands had disarmed more improvised devices than anyone could count. Hospital Corpsman Second Class Alex Chen, whose medical skills had saved more lives than bullets had taken. Petty Officer Second Class Tommy Baker, their communications specialist who could establish contact with base from anywhere on Earth. Petty Officer First Class Carlos Santos, a sniper whose accuracy was legendary even among elite units. Petty Officer Second Class Mike Thompson, their breacher who could open any door or create one where none existed. And finally, Petty Officer First Class Brian Kelly, their intelligence specialist whose ability to read situations had kept them alive through countless missions. The team moved with the fluid precision that came from years of training and dozens of missions together. They had fought in Iraq, Somalia, and Afghanistan, facing everything from insurgent ambushes to hostage rescues. Each man knew exactly where the others would be without looking, their movements choreographed by experience and trust. Morrison took point as they approached the compound perimeter. The chain-link fence had long since rusted and fallen in several places, creating easy entry points. Through his night vision, everything appeared in shades of green and black, the familiar monochrome world where SEALs conducted most of their operations. The compound was silent except for the whisper of wind through broken windows and the distant call of some night bird echoing off the mountain walls. Rodriguez moved to the main building's entrance while Santos took an overwatch position that provided clear lines of sight to all approaches. Chen and Kelly flanked the building to check for alternative exits, while Williams and Thompson prepared to breach the main door if necessary. Baker maintained communication with their extraction helicopter, which had already departed for a safer holding position several miles away. The main building's door stood slightly ajar, which immediately raised Morrison's alert level. Abandoned buildings didn't leave doors open for 20 years without weather or animals forcing them wide. He signaled for the team to hold position while he processed this new information. Through the gap in the door, he could see a long hallway disappearing into darkness, with doorways branching off on both sides. Rodriguez appeared beside him, having completed his circuit of the building's exterior. He spoke in whispers that barely registered on their radio system. "Sir, I've got vehicle tracks around the back. Fresh ones, maybe 3 or 4 days old. Looks like at least 2 trucks, possibly more." Morrison felt his stomach tighten. The intelligence briefing had been very specific that no one had been near this compound for months. Either their information was wrong, or someone had been deliberately feeding them false data. Neither possibility was good news for the mission, or his team's safety. Williams rejoined them from his position near the secondary buildings. "I've got evidence of recent habitation in Building 2. Trash, food containers, human waste. Someone's been living here, and recently." His voice carried the same tension that Morrison was feeling. The mission parameters were clear: extract Raven and avoid engagement. But those parameters had been based on intelligence that was proving to be either incomplete or intentionally misleading. Morrison faced the decision that had defined his career: abort and return with incomplete intelligence, or adapt and complete the mission despite changed circumstances. He keyed his radio to address the entire team. "Intelligence appears compromised. We have evidence of recent activity. Rules of engagement remain the same, but everyone stays sharp. We find Raven and extract, but we do it fast." The team acknowledged with silent hand signals, each man adjusting his mental preparation for what was no longer a simple extraction but potentially a combat situation. Morrison made the decision to proceed, but with modifications to their approach. Instead of the standard room-to-room search, they would split into 2-man teams to cover more ground quickly and reduce their time in a potentially compromised location. Chen and Kelly would search Building 2, where Williams had found evidence of recent habitation. Williams and Thompson would take Building 3, while Rodriguez and Santos maintained overwatch from defensive positions. Morrison and Baker would search the main building where Raven was supposed to be waiting. As the team split up, Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a carefully prepared trap. Every detail of their mission briefing had been designed to bring them to this exact location at this exact time. The question was whether Raven was a genuine informant who needed extraction or bait in a larger operation targeting American Special Forces. Morrison and Baker entered the main building through the partially open door, their weapons raised and ready. The hallway stretched ahead of them, lit only by the green glow of their night vision equipment. Doors lined both sides of the corridor, each one a potential hiding place for either their target or an enemy force waiting in ambush. The first room they checked was empty except for debris from years of abandonment. The second contained the remnants of what had once been an office, with a rusted metal desk and filing cabinets that had been stripped of anything valuable decades ago. The third room showed signs of recent use. A sleeping area with relatively clean blankets, empty food containers, and most importantly, American cigarette butts. Baker examined the cigarette butts while Morrison covered the doorway. "These are fresh, sir. Maybe 12 to 18 hours old. And they're Marlboros, not the local brands." The implications were clear. Whoever had been staying in this room was either American or someone with access to American supplies. They continued their search methodically, checking each room while maintaining radio contact with the other teams. Chen and Kelly reported similar signs of recent habitation in Building 2, including evidence that multiple people had been staying there. Williams and Thompson found Building 3 empty but discovered weapons caches hidden in several rooms, weapons that were definitely not Soviet-era surplus. Morrison was beginning to suspect that Raven was not just an informant but potentially an American operative who had been working undercover in the region. The evidence pointed to a team of Americans or American allied forces using the compound as a base of operations, which would explain why intelligence had been reluctant to provide complete details about the mission. They found Raven in the last room of the main building, and Morrison's suspicions were immediately confirmed. Raven was not the Afghan informant they had expected, but a woman in her 30s with distinctly American features, wearing civilian clothes that couldn't hide her military bearing. She was bound with military-grade zip ties and showed signs of recent interrogation. But she was alive and conscious. "Are you Raven?" Morrison asked as Baker cut her restraints. "Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell. Army Intelligence," she replied. Her voice hoarse but steady. "And we need to get out of here now. This whole operation is compromised." Morrison felt pieces of a larger puzzle falling into place, but not in a way that made him feel safer. Mitchell was not just an informant, but an active intelligence operative, which meant their extraction had just become exponentially more complicated. How long have you been here? Who grabbed you? Mitchell rubbed circulation back into her wrists while Baker applied medical attention to her injuries. I've been undercover for 3 months, tracking weapons shipments through this region. Someone burnt my cover 4 days ago. The people holding me aren't local insurgents. They're foreign operators, possibly Russian or Iranian. And they knew you were coming. The radio crackled with Rodriguez's voice from his overwatch position. Commander, we've got movement on the access road. At least 4 vehicles approaching. Approximately 2 miles out. They're moving fast and dark. Morrison's mind raced through tactical options. They had perhaps 10 minutes before the approaching vehicles reached the compound, and their extraction helicopter was 20 minutes away even if called immediately. The compound offered defensive advantages, but could also become a trap if they were surrounded by superior numbers. All teams converge on Building 1 immediately. We're extracting Raven and moving to alternate extraction point Bravo. Extraction point Bravo was a rocky outcrop 3 miles from the compound, accessible only on foot and easily defensible until air support could arrive. As the team regrouped in the main building, Mitchell provided critical intelligence about their situation. The people holding me have been planning this for weeks. They know your standard operating procedures, your communication protocols, even your extraction routes. Someone with high-level access has been feeding them information. Williams was already calculating demolition requirements to deny the weapons caches to hostile forces when Santos reported from his sniper position. I've got visual on the approaching vehicles. 6 trucks, military configuration. Estimate 30 to 40 personnel, and they're carrying serious hardware. Morrison made the decision that would define the next several hours of their lives. Instead of attempting to reach extraction point Bravo while being pursued by superior numbers, they would fortify the compound and fight a defensive action until reinforcements could arrive. It was not the preferred option, but it gave them better odds than trying to outrun trained military units across 3 miles of open mountain terrain. We're staying and fighting. Williams, how quickly can you rig those weapons caches for demolition? Santos, I need firing positions and fields of fire. Chen, get Mitchell stabilized for combat. Everyone else, defensive positions and prepare for siege warfare. The team moved with practiced efficiency, transforming from an extraction unit into a defensive force in minutes. Williams placed demolition charges on the weapons caches while calculating blast patterns that would eliminate enemy resources without bringing down the buildings they needed for cover. Santos identified sniper positions that provided maximum coverage of approaches to the compound. Chen treated Mitchell's injuries and prepared his medical kit for the casualties that would inevitably come. Rodriguez and Kelly established overlapping fields of fire from windows that provided cover, while allowing them to engage approaching enemies. Thompson set up communication equipment and began calling for immediate air support, while Baker established security on their most vulnerable approaches. As the sound of approaching vehicles grew louder, Morrison realized they had warped into something far larger than a simple extraction gone wrong. Mitchell's intelligence about compromised communications meant their enemy had been planning this operation specifically to capture or eliminate SEAL Team 6. The question was whether they were being targeted for what they knew, what they might learn, or simply because eliminating an elite American unit would provide significant propaganda value. The first truck appeared around a bend in the access road, its headlights cutting through the darkness like searching eyes. Morrison watched through his scope as the convoy approached, noting the disciplined way the vehicles moved and the professional manner in which troops dismounted and took positions around the compound perimeter. These were not insurgents or local militia fighters, but trained military personnel with sophisticated equipment and coordination. They moved like special forces units, which meant SEAL Team 6 was facing opponents with similar training and capabilities, but superior numbers and the advantage of having prepared for this specific engagement. Santos's voice came through the radio with deadly calm. I count 42 personnel, mixed small arms and at least 2 heavy machine guns. They're establishing a perimeter at 400 meters and moving to encircle the compound. Professional deployment, military precision. Morrison took a final look at his team's positions and made peace with whatever was about to happen. They had been led into a trap, but they were still SEALs, and they would make their enemies pay dearly for every inch of ground. The real question was whether they could hold out long enough for air support to arrive, and whether anyone back at base would realize their communications had been compromised. As the first shots began to echo across the mountain valley, Morrison couldn't have known that salvation would eventually come from the most unexpected source of all. A sniper who had been watching and waiting in the darkness above them, Someone whose identity would challenge everything they believed about who was friend and who was enemy in the complex world of special operations warfare. The first bullets shattered the silence like thunder in a cathedral, sending concrete fragments spraying across the room, where Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison crouched beside Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell. The enemy had opened fire simultaneously from multiple positions, their muzzle flashes creating a deadly constellation around the compound's perimeter. Morrison's team responded immediately, their return fire precise and disciplined despite being outnumbered nearly 6-1. Petty Officer First Class Carlos Santos had positioned himself in the main building's highest window, giving him clear lines of sight to most of the enemy positions. His rifle spoke with methodical precision, each shot carefully aimed and deliberate. Through his scope he could see the professionalism of their attackers. They moved with military discipline, used proper cover and concealment techniques, and coordinated their assault with the kind of efficiency that came from extensive training and combat experience. "Commander, these guys aren't locals," Santos reported over the radio, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. "They're using military hand signals, proper fire and movement tactics." This is a professional military unit, probably Special Forces level. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Williams had taken position in a room facing the compound's main approach, where the majority of enemy vehicles had deployed. He watched as troops moved with practiced coordination, some laying down suppressing fire while others advanced using proper bounding techniques. The attacking force had split into multiple elements, with some maintaining long-range fire while others moved to establish closer positions for a coordinated assault. "They're trying to fix us in place while they maneuver for better positions," Williams observed, adjusting his rifle's scope as targets moved between cover points. Classic special operations assault pattern. These people have done this before. Hospital Corpsman Second Class Alex Chen had established his aid station in the most protected area of the main building, where he could treat casualties while remaining relatively safe from enemy fire. Lieutenant Mitchell sat beside him, having insisted on taking a rifle despite her recent captivity and injuries. Her military training was evident in the way she handled her weapon and assessed their tactical situation. "How long can we hold them?" she asked Morrison, who was moving between defensive positions to coordinate his team's response. Morrison considered their ammunition supplies and the intensity of enemy fire before answering. "We've got enough ammunition for maybe 40 minutes of sustained combat at this rate. Air support is 25 minutes out, assuming they can get through whatever air defenses these people might have brought with them." The enemy had clearly prepared for this engagement with the same attention to detail that SEALs brought to their own operations. They had positioned vehicles to provide both transportation and mobile cover, established overlapping fields of fire, and were using suppressive fire to control the SEALs' movement while their assault teams maneuvered into position. Petty Officer Second Class Tommy Baker was maintaining communication with their base while coordinating with their distant air support. The news he received was not encouraging. "Sir, base reports unusual radio interference in our area. They're having difficulty maintaining clear communication with our air support. Could be natural atmospheric conditions or electronic warfare." Morrison felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. Their attackers weren't just professional military, they had come prepared for electronic warfare, which suggested state-level resources and planning. This operation had been designed specifically to isolate and eliminate his team, using sophisticated intelligence and military capabilities that went far beyond typical insurgent or terrorist organizations. Petty Officer First Class Danny Rodriguez had established himself near the compound's rear entrance, watching for flanking maneuvers or attempts to breach their perimeter from unexpected directions. The position gave him a view of the mountainside above the compound, where rocky outcrops and sparse vegetation provided numerous hiding places for enemy snipers or observation teams. "Movement on the high ground," Rodriguez reported. "I've got at least 3 positions with what look like sniper teams. They're trying to establish overwatch on our positions." Santos adjusted his own position to engage the sniper teams, beginning a deadly game of cat and mouse between expert marksmen. The enemy snipers were skilled enough to use proper concealment and movement techniques, making them difficult targets even for someone of Santos's capabilities. Each time he acquired a target, the enemy sniper would relocate before he could take a shot. Petty Officer Second Class Mike Thompson had positioned himself to cover one of the compound's most vulnerable approaches, a covered walkway that connected the main building to the secondary structures. Enemy forces were using this covered approach to move closer to their positions without exposing themselves to defensive fire. Thompson's job was to prevent enemy infiltration while conserving ammunition for the longer fight that seemed inevitable. The intensity of incoming fire increased as the enemy established better positions around the perimeter. Bullets cracked through windows and doorways with increasing frequency, forcing the SEALs to remain in cover and limiting their ability to return effective fire. The attackers were using classic suppression tactics, trying to keep the defenders' heads down while assault teams moved into position for the final attack. Petty Officer First Class Brian Kelly had established himself in a position that provided good fields of fire while allowing him to observe enemy tactics and movement patterns. His intelligence background helped him analyze the attacking force's organization and predict their likely courses of action. What he saw concerned him greatly. "Sir, based on their deployment and movement patterns, I estimate we're facing at least 40 personnel with military training equivalent to our own. They've got crew-served weapons, probable grenade launchers, and what looks like at least 2 sniper teams. They're professional enough to coordinate a complex assault and disciplined enough to stick to a plan under fire." Morrison absorbed this intelligence while calculating their defensive options. His team was vastly outnumbered by opponents with equal training and superior equipment. Their only advantages were defensive positions and the psychological edge that came from being cornered with no alternative except victory or death. Williams had been observing the enemy's use of vehicles and equipment, noting details that might provide tactical advantages. "Commander, they've got at least 2 vehicles equipped with heavy machine guns, probably 50 caliber. They're using them for suppression while their infantry maneuvers. If they coordinate properly, they can pin us down long enough for their assault teams to get close enough for grenades or rocket-propelled grenades." The sound of incoming mortar rounds whistling through the air sent everyone diving for the deepest cover available. The rounds impacted around the compound with professional precision, close enough to demonstrate capability, but not close enough to cause immediate casualties. It was a message. The enemy could destroy the buildings if they chose to, but they wanted something from the defenders first. Mitchell had been listening to the tactical discussion while checking her rifle and equipment. Her intelligence background provided insights that complemented the SEAL's tactical knowledge. "They're not trying to kill us immediately. If they wanted us dead, those mortar rounds would have been direct hits. They want something from us, probably intelligence or prisoners for interrogation." Morrison realized she was right. A force with this level of capability could have simply destroyed the compound with sustained mortar fire or rocket attacks. Instead, they were conducting a careful assault designed to capture rather than kill the defenders. This realization changed his tactical calculations but didn't improve their situation significantly. Santos had managed to identify one of the enemy sniper positions and was preparing to engage when his radio crackled with an unexpected report. "Commander, I've got something weird up here. There's a muzzle flash from the high rocks above the enemy positions, but it's not firing at us. Someone else is up there, and they just took a shot at one of the enemy snipers." Morrison felt confusion mixed with hope as he tried to process this new information. Another player had entered the deadly game being played around the compound, someone who was apparently engaging the force that had trapped his team. The question was whether this unknown sniper was friend, foe, or simply another enemy with different objectives. Chen's medical training extended to analyzing battlefield sounds and interpreting the acoustic signatures of different weapons. That rifle shot came from at least 800 meters out, probably more. Whoever took that shot is using a high-powered rifle and knows how to use it. The sound signature suggests something in the 300 Winchester Magnum range. Rodriguez confirmed Santos's observation from his position covering the rear approaches. "I can see muzzle blast residue from somewhere up in those rocks. Definitely someone with a heavy rifle, and they're engaging targets we can't see from down here." The enemy force around the compound had noticed the new player as well. Their fire patterns changed as some units redirected their attention to the high ground, where the unknown sniper was operating. Radio chatter increased among the attacking force, though the SEALs couldn't understand the language being used. The attackers' coordination became less smooth as they tried to deal with threats from multiple directions. Thompson had been monitoring enemy radio communications on frequencies commonly used by military units in the region. While he couldn't understand the specific language, he could analyze voice patterns and communication discipline. "Sir, whoever these people are, they're not happy about our new friend up in the rocks. Their communication patterns suggest confusion and concern. They weren't expecting a third party to join this fight. Baker's communication equipment picked up a brief transmission on an emergency frequency that all American forces monitored. The message was short and cryptic. Friendly overwatch established. Maintain defensive positions. Extraction support inbound." The transmission used proper military communication protocols and American code words, but the voice was unfamiliar. Morrison tried to process this new information while maintaining command of his team's defensive efforts. Someone claiming to be friendly had established an overwatch position and was apparently providing fire support against their attackers. The transmission suggested that extraction support was coming, but from whom and when remained unclear. Santos had taken advantage of the enemy's confusion about the unknown sniper to engage several targets that had exposed themselves while trying to locate the new threat. His rifle cracked steadily as he engaged enemy personnel with the methodical precision that had made him legendary among special operations snipers. Each shot was carefully aimed and resulted in one less enemy fighter in the assault force. Enemy strength is down to maybe 35 personnel, Santos reported. Between our new friend up in the rocks and our own fire, we've reduced their numbers significantly. But they're adapting and becoming more cautious. Williams had been watching the enemy's tactical adjustments and wasn't entirely optimistic about their improving situation. They're pulling back to more distant positions and increasing their use of indirect fire. If they can't assault us directly because of the sniper threat, they might switch to bombardment tactics. Those mortars could turn this compound into rubble if they decide to get serious about it. The unknown sniper's intervention had created a temporary stalemate, but Morrison knew it couldn't last indefinitely. His team's ammunition was still limited, the enemy still had superior numbers and equipment, and their mysterious allies' capabilities and intentions remained completely unknown. The situation had improved, but they were far from safe. Kelly had been observing the enemy's reaction patterns and movement adjustments in response to the sniper threat. His intelligence analysis suggested several possible explanations for their mysterious ally. Sir, based on the enemy's reaction and the precision of those long-range shots, we're dealing with someone with serious military training. Could be CIA, could be foreign special forces, could even be a military unit we don't know about operating in this area. Chen had been treating minor wounds from concrete fragments and preparing for more serious casualties that seemed inevitable as the firefight continued. His medical supplies were adequate for current needs but wouldn't last through a prolonged engagement if casualties mounted. We need to either win this fight quickly or find a way to extract soon. I can handle routine injuries, but if someone takes serious damage, we're going to need surgical facilities. Rodriguez reported increased movement among enemy forces as they attempted to locate and eliminate the unknown sniper while maintaining their siege of the compound. They're sending teams up into the high ground, trying to flank whoever's providing our fire support. If they succeed in taking out our new friend, we're back to the original situation but with less ammunition. Morrison made a decision that represented a significant tactical risk but offered their best chance for survival. Instead of waiting passively for air support that might or might not arrive, he would coordinate with their unknown ally to break the siege through aggressive action. It was dangerous, but remaining in their current position guaranteed eventual defeat, as their ammunition ran low and enemy reinforcements potentially arrived. Santos, can you establish communication with our Overwatch friend? We need to coordinate if we're going to break out of here. Santos adjusted his radio to the emergency frequency where they had received the earlier transmission, and began attempting to establish contact with their mysterious ally. The response came quickly, and in perfect American English, with a slight accent that none of them could immediately identify. SEAL Team 6, this is Overwatch. I have visual on your position and the surrounding enemy forces. Recommend you prepare for coordinated breakout on my signal. I can provide suppressive fire on enemy positions, but you'll need to move fast when the opportunity presents itself. Morrison felt a mixture of relief and caution at this confirmation that their ally was indeed friendly and capable of coordinated action. However, the unknown sniper's identity and objectives remained mysterious, and trusting an unknown operative represented a significant risk in an already dangerous situation. As enemy forces continued their attempts to locate and eliminate their Overwatch support, Morrison realized that their window of opportunity was closing rapidly. Soon they would need to make a decision about whether to trust their mysterious ally and attempt to break out, or continue their defensive action and hope that air support would arrive before their ammunition ran out and their position became untenable. The radio transmission that would change everything came at 0247 hours, cutting through the static and chaos of the firefight with crystalline clarity. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison pressed his earpiece harder against his head, unable to believe what he was hearing. The voice providing Overwatch support spoke with the cadence and terminology of American Special Forces, but underneath the professional military language was an accent that sent chills down his spine. SEAL Team 6, this is Overwatch. I have positive identification on enemy command element 200 meters northeast of your position, requesting confirmation before engagement. These targets are not local insurgents. Repeat, these are foreign military personnel with advanced equipment and training. Morrison exchanged glances with Chief Petty Officer Marcus Williams, who had also heard the transmission. Something in the voice was familiar, but neither man could place where they might have heard it before. The accent was slight but distinctive, possibly Eastern European or Russian, which raised immediate questions about who was providing their fire support and why. Petty Officer First Class Carlos Santos had been observing the enemy command element through his scope when the transmission came. He could see 3 figures in advanced tactical gear coordinating the assault on the compound, using hand signals and radio communications with the kind of precision that indicated extensive military training. Confirmed Overwatch. I have visual on 3 personnel in command configuration. They appear to be directing the overall assault. The unknown sniper's next transmission carried a tone that made Morrison's blood run cold. Target acquisition complete. Engaging now. The voice carried the calm professionalism of someone who had done this many times before, but underneath that professionalism was something else. A personal intensity that suggested this engagement was about more than just tactical necessity. The rifle shot that followed was unlike anything Santos had heard before. The sound signature indicated an extremely high-powered rifle, probably custom-built for long-range precision work. Through his scope, he watched one of the enemy commanders drop instantly, the precision of the shot indicating a marksman of extraordinary skill operating at extreme range in difficult conditions. Hospital Corpsman Second Class Alex Chen had been listening to radio chatter while treating Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell's injuries when something in the sniper's voice triggered a memory. The accent, the tone, the specific way certain words were pronounced, it reminded him of someone, but the connection remained frustratingly elusive. Sir, there's something familiar about that voice. I can't place it, but I've heard it before. Mitchell looked up from checking her rifle, her intelligence background making her sensitive to details that others might miss. The accent isn't Russian, it's Ukrainian, specifically Western Ukrainian, probably from someone who learned English in a military context. And there's something else. The way he uses American tactical terminology suggests extensive training with U.S. forces. Morrison felt pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to form, but the picture they created was disturbing. A Ukrainian operative with intimate knowledge of American special operations procedures was providing fire support against what appeared to be a Russian military unit that had trapped his team. The geopolitical implications were staggering, but more immediate was the question of whether they could trust this unknown ally. Petty Officer Second Class Tommy Baker had been monitoring multiple communication frequencies when he picked up something that changed the entire context of their situation. Commander, I'm intercepting radio traffic in Russian. These people are definitely Russian military, probably Spetsnaz based on their equipment and tactics. But here's the weird part. They're talking about recovering something called Package Prometheus and eliminating Blackwater assets. The reference to Blackwater assets was confusing since Morrison's team had no connection to private military contractors. But Package Prometheus rang bells in his memory of classified briefings he had received months earlier. The package was supposedly intelligence related to Russian weapons shipments to terrorist organizations. Intelligence that had been gathered by deep cover operatives working in extremely dangerous conditions. Williams had been observing the Russian forces' reaction to their commander's death when he noticed something that made his tactical assessment even more complex. Sir, these Russians aren't just here for us. They've got specialized equipment that's designed for intelligence gathering, not combat. This feels like they were expecting to capture something specific, and we just happened to get in the way. The unknown sniper's voice came through their radio again, this time with information that confirmed Williams's assessment. SEAL Team 6, be advised that enemy forces are equipped for intelligence collection, not standard combat operations. They have electronic warfare equipment, specialized computer gear, and what appears to be interrogation equipment. This was planned as a capture operation, not an elimination mission. Santos had been watching the Russian response to their commander's death and noticed their tactics shifting in ways that supported the sniper's assessment. They're pulling back to more defensive positions and setting up what looks like electronic surveillance equipment. It's like they're more interested in monitoring communications than continuing the assault. Morrison realized that his team had stumbled into the middle of an intelligence operation that went far beyond their original extraction mission. The Russians had been planning to capture Lieutenant Mitchell and whatever information she possessed about weapons shipments, but the arrival of SEAL Team 6 had complicated their operation beyond anything they had anticipated. Chen's medical training included psychological observation skills that helped him analyze voice patterns and stress indicators. As he listened to more transmissions from their mysterious ally, details began clicking into place. Sir, I know where I've heard that voice before. Medical training. Exercise about 18 months ago, joint training with foreign special operations units. There was a Ukrainian instructor who worked with us on combat medical procedures. The memory that had been nagging at Chen suddenly crystallized with shocking clarity. The instructor had been introduced as Major Viktor Kozlov, a Ukrainian Special Forces medic who had trained with American units under a classified military exchange program. But according to the briefings, Kozlov had been killed in action 6 months earlier, during a deep cover operation in Russian-controlled territory. Mitchell's intelligence background allowed her to put together connections that the SEALs might have missed. If Chen is right about the voice, then we're dealing with someone who's supposed to be dead according to official records. That suggests either intelligence manipulation or someone who's been operating completely off the books for the past 6 months. Morrison keyed his radio to address their mysterious ally directly, hoping to get answers to questions that were becoming more critical with each passing minute. Overwatch. Request identification and confirmation of operational authority. We need to know who we're dealing with before we commit to coordinated action. The response came after a long pause, during which the firefight around the compound continued at a reduced intensity as Russian forces repositioned and reassessed their situation. When the voice finally came through their radio, it carried a weight of exhaustion and pain that suggested months of operations under extreme stress. SEAL Team 6. My name is Major Viktor Kozlov, Ukrainian Armed Forces, currently operating under deep cover authorization from Joint Intelligence Command. I was declared killed in action 6 months ago as cover for ongoing operations against Russian weapons trafficking networks. Lieutenant Mitchell has intelligence that my people died together. I will not allow it to fall into Russian hands. Morrison felt the full complexity of their situation settling around him like a suffocating blanket. They were trapped in the middle of an international intelligence operation involving Ukrainian deep cover operatives, Russian special forces, and weapons trafficking networks that apparently justified the highest levels of classified operations. His team's extraction mission had been either coincidental timing or part of a larger operation that no one had bothered to inform him about. Rodriguez had been observing Russian movement patterns when he noticed something that added another layer of complexity to their situation. "Sir, I've got movement on the high ground behind us." "Looks like the Russians are trying to flank our Overwatch friend, but there's something else up there. Multiple heat signatures, possibly another team." Kozlov's voice came through the radio with increased urgency as he apparently observed the same movement that Rodriguez had detected. "SEAL Team 6, be advised that Russian reinforcements have arrived. I count at least 12 additional personnel moving to flank my position. They're equipped with night vision and what appears to be specialized climbing gear. This is about to become significantly more complicated." Williams calculated their tactical situation with the grim precision of someone who had survived numerous impossible odds. They had perhaps 20 minutes of ammunition remaining at current consumption rates, were surrounded by professional Russian special forces with superior numbers and equipment, and their only ally was a supposedly dead Ukrainian operative who was about to be surrounded himself. Thompson had been maintaining communication with their base when he received information that changed their entire understanding of the situation. "Sir, base reports that Lieutenant Mitchell's extraction was authorized at the highest levels of military intelligence. But here's the concerning part. They're denying any knowledge of our mission or current location. According to official records, we're not supposed to be here." Morrison felt the full impact of realizing that his team had been deliberately placed in this situation without proper authorization or support. Someone with access to the highest levels of military intelligence had orchestrated their presence at the compound at the exact time when Russian forces were attempting to capture Mitchell and her intelligence. The question was whether they had been sent as rescue support or as expendable assets to provide cover for a larger operation. Kelly's intelligence background helped him analyze the implications of their situation with cold professional clarity. "Sir, if we're operating without official authorization and the mission is being denied at higher levels, then we're completely on our own. No air support is coming, no extraction is planned. And if we die here, our deaths will be classified and forgotten." Baker had been monitoring all available communication frequencies when he intercepted a transmission that provided the final piece of the puzzle they needed to understand their situation. The transmission was in heavily accented English and apparently directed toward the Russian forces surrounding the compound. "Blackwater assets have been isolated and are contained within the target zone. Prometheus package is confirmed present and will be recovered as planned. Elimination of all personnel is authorized once intelligence has been extracted. No survivors, no evidence." Morrison realized that someone in the American intelligence community had sold out his team and Lieutenant Mitchell to Russian intelligence, providing them with detailed operational plans and authorizing their elimination once the Russians had recovered whatever intelligence Mitchell possessed. The trap had been planned with intimate knowledge of American special operations procedures and had been designed to ensure that no witnesses survived. Santos had been engaging Russian forces trying to advance on their positions when he made an observation that offered a slim hope for survival. "Sir, our Overwatch friend has taken out 6 enemy personnel in the last 10 minutes, and he's doing it with surgical precision at extreme range. If he's as good as he appears to be, and if we can coordinate properly, we might be able to break their siege before his position is compromised. Kozlov's voice came through their radio with information that confirmed Santos's assessment while providing additional tactical intelligence. SEAL Team 6, I have eliminated enemy sniper teams and reduced their overall strength by approximately 20%. However, I am running low on ammunition and will soon be engaged by flanking forces. If we are going to coordinate a breakout, it must happen in the next 15 minutes. Morrison made the decision that would determine whether his team lived or died in the next quarter hour. Despite the complex international implications and the likelihood that they had been betrayed by their own intelligence community, he chose to trust the Ukrainian operative who had already demonstrated both capability and commitment to their survival. Overwatch, we're committed to coordinated breakout. What do you need from us? Kozlov's response came with the calm professionalism of someone who had spent months planning for exactly this type of situation. I need you to create maximum chaos in the compound in exactly 10 minutes. Set off explosives, use all available firepower, make them think you're conducting a suicide assault. When they focus on your position, I will eliminate their command structure and heavy weapons teams. Then you move fast toward the high ground where I can provide cover for your extraction to secondary positions. Morrison looked at his team, each man understanding that they were about to risk everything on the word of a man who was supposed to be dead and whose objectives they didn't fully understand. But with no other options available and time running out, trust in their mysterious ally had become their only chance for survival. As the minutes counted down toward their coordinated breakout attempt, Morrison couldn't know that Major Viktor Kozlov had spent the last 6 months planning not just for his own survival, but for revenge against the people who had betrayed his unit and left them to die in a Russian prison. The intelligence that Lieutenant Mitchell carried was more than just information about weapons trafficking. It was evidence of American officials who had been selling classified information to Russian intelligence for over a year. The breakout that was about to begin would determine not just whether SEAL Team 6 survived the night, but whether the truth about American intelligence betrayal would ever see daylight or die with them in the mountains of Afghanistan. At exactly 0315 hours, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Williams triggered the first explosion that would tear apart the night and signal the beginning of the most desperate 15 minutes in the lives of 8 American warriors. The weapons cache in Building 2 erupted in a fireball that sent concrete fragments and metal debris raining down across the compound, creating the chaos that Major Viktor Kozlov needed to begin his deadly work from the mountainside above. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison had positioned his team for maximum psychological impact rather than tactical advantage, knowing that their survival depended on convincing the Russian forces that SEAL Team 6 was conducting a suicide assault rather than a coordinated breakout. Every man understood that the next few minutes would determine whether they lived to see dawn or died as forgotten casualties of an operation that officially never existed. Petty Officer First Class Carlos Santos opened fire with methodical precision, his rifle cracking steadily as he engaged every Russian position visible from his window. He wasn't trying to achieve maximum casualties, but rather to create the impression of desperate men fighting to the death. Each muzzle flash from his position drew return fire that shattered windows and sent concrete chips flying, adding to the chaos that masked their true intentions. Hospital Corpsman Second Class Alex Chen had positioned himself near Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell in the most protected area of the main building, ready to move when Morrison gave the signal for their breakout attempt. Mitchell had insisted on carrying a rifle despite her injuries, and Chen could see the determination in her eyes that spoke of someone who understood exactly what intelligence she carried and why so many people were willing to die to possess or protect it. The second explosion, triggered by Petty Officer Second Class Mike Thompson, destroyed Building 3 and sent a mushroom cloud of debris high into the night sky. The blast was visible for miles and created enough noise to mask the sound of Kozlov's rifle as he began systematically eliminating Russian command personnel from his concealed position in the rocks above. Through his scope, Santos watched Russian forces react exactly as Kozlov had predicted. Infantry units moved closer to the compound to prepare for what they believed would be a final assault by desperate Americans, while heavy weapons teams repositioned to provide suppressive fire against the buildings where the SEALs were supposedly making their last stand. Morrison keyed his radio to coordinate with Kozlov, while his team continued their diversionary assault. Overwatch, Buildings 2 and 3 are down. We're maintaining maximum noise and muzzle flash from Building 1. What's your status on enemy command elimination? Kozlov's response came between the measured cracks of his rifle as he engaged targets with surgical precision. 3 command personnel eliminated. Working on heavy weapons teams now. Enemy forces are consolidating exactly as predicted. Begin your movement in 60 seconds toward the north wall breach that Thompson created. Petty Officer First Class Danny Rodriguez had been watching the compound's northern perimeter, where Thompson's explosions had created a gap in the wall that would serve as their exit point. Russian forces had not yet repositioned to cover this area, apparently believing that any American movement would be toward the south where their vehicles provided potential escape routes. Petty Officer Second Class Tommy Baker maintained communication equipment while preparing for rapid movement, knowing that their extraction depended on maintaining contact with Kozlov during the most dangerous phase of their breakout. The radio was their only link to the sniper, whose accuracy and tactical knowledge had become their lifeline in an impossible situation. Williams had rigged the remaining explosive charges to detonate on a timer, ensuring that Building 1 would be destroyed shortly after their departure to convince Russian forces that the Americans had died in a final, desperate explosion. The timing had to be perfect. Too early and the Russians would realize the explosion was a diversion. Too late and Russian forces would have time to pursue them before the confusion provided cover for their escape. Petty Officer First Class Brian Kelly had been observing Russian tactical adjustments and movement patterns, noting how their enemies reacted to the explosive attacks with professional discipline while still falling into the psychological trap that Kozlov had designed. "Sir, they're moving exactly as Overwatch predicted. Heavy weapons teams are repositioning to engage our current location, leaving the northern approach relatively unguarded." Morrison made the decision that committed his team to their desperate gamble with survival. "All personnel, prepare for immediate movement to Extraction Point Alpha. Overwatch, we are beginning movement now." The extraction point was a rocky outcrop 300 meters from the compound where Kozlov could provide cover, while they moved to more distant positions that offered better concealment and defensive advantages. Santos fired his remaining ammunition in rapid succession, creating maximum muzzle flash and noise, before abandoning his position and moving toward the breach in the northern wall. Each shot was aimed at different Russian positions to maintain the impression that multiple defenders were still fighting from Building 1 even as the team began their extraction. Chen helped Mitchell move quickly toward their exit point, while Williams completed final preparations on the delayed explosive charges that would complete the deception. The lieutenant moved with more strength than her recent captivity should have allowed, driven by the knowledge that the intelligence she carried had already cost too many lives to be lost through failure at this critical moment. Thompson had positioned himself to cover their withdrawal route, engaging Russian forces that attempted to move toward the northern perimeter, while his teammates moved through the breach he had created. His rifle spoke with controlled bursts designed to keep enemy heads down, without revealing that American forces were withdrawing, rather than conducting a final desperate assault. Rodriguez led the movement toward Extraction Point Alpha, using natural cover and the confusion created by ongoing explosions to mask their departure from the compound. His experience as point man served the team well, as he identified the safest route through terrain that offered concealment while avoiding areas where Russian forces might have positioned observation teams. Baker maintained communication with Kozlov while moving, providing updates on their progress and receiving tactical information about Russian force disposition around their planned route. The Ukrainian sniper's knowledge of enemy positions proved invaluable as he guided them around patrol routes and observation positions that could have compromised their escape. Kelly brought up the rear of their formation, watching for pursuit while ensuring that no evidence of their departure was left behind for Russian forces to discover. His intelligence background made him acutely aware of how important it was to maintain the deception that would keep Russian forces focused on the compound rather than pursuing the escaping Americans. Williams' final explosives detonated exactly on schedule, sending Building 1 erupting skyward in a massive fireball that convinced watching Russian forces that SEAL Team 6 had died in a final suicidal explosion rather than escaping into the darkness. The blast was visible for miles and created enough chaos to mask any sounds or movement that might have revealed their successful withdrawal. Morrison counted his personnel as they reached the relative safety of Extraction Point Alpha, a defensive position among rocky outcrops that provided concealment while allowing Kozlov to maintain overwatch of their position. For the first time in hours, he allowed himself to believe that his team might actually survive the night, though he knew they were still deep in enemy territory with limited ammunition and no official support. Santos immediately established a defensive position that allowed him to observe their back trail and engage any pursuit that might follow them from the compound. Through his scope, he could see Russian forces converging on the burning ruins of Building 1, apparently convinced that their targets had been eliminated in the final explosion. Chen established a medical station in the most protected area of their position while conducting a more thorough examination of Mitchell's injuries. The lieutenant had been maintaining her strength through determination and adrenaline, but she was beginning to show signs of exhaustion and needed medical attention that could only be provided in a secure environment. Kozlov's voice came through their radio with information that confirmed their escape had been successful, but revealed the larger tactical situation that still threatened their survival. SEAL Team 6. Enemy forces believe you are dead and are conducting battle damage assessment of the compound. However, reinforcements are en route to this area, including air assets. We need to move to more distant positions within the next 30 minutes. Morrison realized that their escape from the compound had been only the first phase of what would be a much longer and more complex survival situation. They were in mountainous terrain controlled by hostile forces, with limited supplies and no official support from their own military. Their only ally was a Ukrainian operative whose objectives and capabilities remained largely unknown. Rodriguez reported movement in the valley below their position as Russian forces continued to investigate the compound's destruction while establishing perimeter security around the area. Sir, they're being thorough about searching the ruins, but they're not expanding their search pattern beyond the immediate area. As long as we stay quiet and avoid detection, they seem to believe we're dead. Thompson had been monitoring Russian radio communications and intercepted transmissions that provided critical intelligence about their current situation. Sir, Russian command is reporting mission success and requesting extraction for their personnel. They're planning to leave the area within 2 hours, but they're also requesting air support to search for any possible survivors. Baker's communication equipment picked up transmissions on American military frequencies that provided both hope and concern about their prospects for survival. Commander, I'm picking up radio chatter that suggests American air assets are being deployed to this area, but the transmissions are using code words that don't match our current operational parameters. Someone's coming, but I can't confirm they're friendly to our situation. Williams had been calculating their tactical situation and ammunition supplies while establishing defensive positions around their temporary location. Sir, we've got enough ammunition for maybe one more significant engagement, but not enough for sustained combat. If we run into another Russian unit or if air support finds us, we'll need to rely heavily on concealment and Overwatch's capabilities. Kelly's intelligence background allowed him to analyze the broader implications of their situation while considering their options for reaching safety. Sir, based on Russian force disposition and our current location, we're approximately 15 miles from the nearest friendly positions. That's a difficult movement through hostile territory, but it's possible if we can avoid detection and maintain our current operational security. Mitchell had been listening to the tactical discussion while recovering her strength, and her intelligence background provided perspectives that the SEALs might not have considered. The information I'm carrying includes details about American officials who have been providing intelligence to Russian services. If we can reach friendly territory, this intelligence could expose a network that goes to the highest levels of government. Morrison understood that their mission had evolved far beyond a simple extraction into something with potential national security implications that might explain why his team had been placed in this situation without proper authorization. Someone wanted either to protect the intelligence Mitchell carried or to ensure that it never reached American authorities. Kozlov's voice came through their radio with information that would determine their next course of action and potentially their survival for the remainder of their time in hostile territory. SEAL Team 6, I have detailed knowledge of extraction routes that avoid Russian patrol patterns and observation posts. I can guide you to positions where friendly air support can extract you safely, but the movement will require 3 days of travel through difficult terrain while avoiding multiple enemy units. Santos had been observing the tactical situation while considering their options for long-term survival in hostile territory. Sir, if Overwatch is willing to guide us out, and his knowledge of enemy disposition is as good as his shooting, we've got a reasonable chance of reaching extraction points. But we'll need to trust him completely, and we still don't know what his agenda is beyond helping us survive. Morrison faced the decision that would determine not only his team's fate, but potentially the exposure of intelligence that could affect national security at the highest levels. Trust the Ukrainian operative who had already saved their lives and follow his guidance through hostile territory, or attempt to find their own way to safety while risking capture by Russian forces who believed them to be dead. As Russian forces began withdrawing from the compound area and the immediate threat diminished, Morrison realized that the most dangerous phase of their operation was just beginning. They had escaped the trap, but now they faced days of movement through enemy-controlled territory while carrying intelligence that multiple governments were willing to kill to possess or protect. 3 days of movement through the unforgiving Afghan mountains had stripped away everything except the essential truth that survival required trust between warriors who had shared combat. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison watched Major Victor Kozlov emerge from the morning shadows like a ghost returning from the dead, carrying intelligence that would shatter everything they thought they understood about their mission and the people who had sent them to die. The Ukrainian operative had guided SEAL Team 6 through terrain that should have been impossible to navigate while avoiding Russian patrols, Afghan militia groups, and the persistent search efforts of helicopters that appeared each morning to hunt for survivors of the compound engagement. Kozlov's knowledge of the mountains was complete and precise, suggesting months or years of operations in the specific region. Hospital corpsman second class Alex Chen had spent those 3 days treating not only Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell's injuries, but also learning details about Kozlov's background that explained his intimate familiarity with American Special Operations procedures. The Ukrainian had trained with U.S. forces for over 2 years before being assigned to deep cover operations that required him to disappear completely from official records. He's been working alone for 8 months, Chen reported to Morrison as they prepared for what Kozlov promised would be their final day of movement toward extraction. His entire unit was betrayed by someone in American intelligence and killed in a Russian prison. He's been conducting a personal war against the people responsible ever since. Petty Officer First Class Carlos Santos had spent hours observing Kozlov's movement techniques and tactical knowledge, developing a professional respect for someone whose skills rivaled those of the most elite American Special Operations personnel. The Ukrainian moved through hostile territory with the confidence of someone who had been hunting and being hunted in these mountains for months. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Williams had been analyzing their route choices and the way Kozlov avoided enemy forces with uncanny precision, leading to the disturbing conclusion that their guide possessed intelligence sources that went far beyond what a single operative should have been able to develop independently. Sir, he knows too much about Russian operations and American intelligence activities. Someone's been feeding him information at a very high level. The truth that would change everything came during their final night before reaching the extraction zone, when Kozlov finally revealed the full scope of what they had become involved in, and why so many people were willing to kill to possess or suppress the intelligence that Mitchell carried. Your Lieutenant Mitchell was not just gathering intelligence about weapons trafficking, Kozlov explained as they sheltered in a cave that provided concealment from the helicopters that continued searching for them. She was gathering evidence of American officials who have been selling classified information to Russian intelligence for over 18 months. Morrison felt the final pieces of the puzzle falling into place with sickening clarity. His team had been sent to extract Mitchell not to save an intelligence asset, but to eliminate the only witness to a treason network that reached the highest levels of American government. The mission had been designed to result in their deaths along with Mitchell's, ensuring that the evidence of betrayal would never surface. Petty Officer First Class Danny Rodriguez had been maintaining watch when he observed something that confirmed Kozlov's explanation of their situation. Sir, I've been monitoring radio traffic, and American helicopters have been coordinating with Russian ground forces in search patterns that should be classified. Someone on our side is definitely working with the people who tried to kill us. Lieutenant Mitchell had been recovering her strength while preparing the intelligence reports that would either expose the treason network or die with them if they failed to reach friendly territory. Her laptop contained documented proof of payments, communication intercepts, and operational details that implicated officials whose betrayal had resulted in the deaths of American operatives throughout Central Asia. Petty Officer Second Class Tommy Baker had been monitoring communication frequencies when he intercepted transmissions that provided the final confirmation of how deeply the betrayal extended into American intelligence services. Sir, I'm picking up coordination between American and Russian forces using joint communication protocols. They're not just cooperating, they're operating under unified command. Petty Officer First Class Brian Kelly's intelligence background allowed him to analyze the implications of what they had discovered with cold professional clarity. Sir, if Mitchell's evidence is accurate and the coordination we're observing is real, then this treason network has been responsible for the compromise of multiple American operations and the deaths of personnel throughout this region. Kozlov had been preparing for their final approach to the extraction zone when he revealed information that explained his personal motivation for risking his life to help American forces despite having every reason to distrust U.S. intelligence services. The network that betrayed my unit is the same network that has been trying to eliminate Lieutenant Mitchell and her evidence. My people died because Americans sold us to Russian intelligence, but other Americans died because of the same betrayal. Morrison understood that their survival and successful extraction had become about more than just getting his team home alive. They carried evidence that could expose a treason network responsible for the deaths of American and Allied personnel across multiple operations, but only if they could reach people within the U.S. government who were not part of the conspiracy. Petty Officer Second Class Mike Thompson had been observing helicopter search patterns and noted something that supported Kozlov's assessment of their situation. Sir, the American aircraft searching for us are using flight patterns that consistently avoid areas where Russian ground forces are operating. They're coordinating to prevent us from reaching extraction, not to rescue us. Santos had been calculating their tactical situation as they prepared for the most dangerous phase of their extraction. knowing that the final approach to friendly territory would require them to cross areas where both American and Russian forces would be watching for survivors. Sir, if our own people are working against us, then reaching the extraction zone might just deliver us to the people who want us dead. Chen's medical training extended to psychological assessment, and he had been observing Mitchell's condition while considering her ability to survive whatever confrontation awaited them at the extraction zone. Lieutenant Mitchell is stronger than her injuries suggest, but she's operating on pure determination at this point. If we face serious resistance, I'm not sure she can maintain the physical demands of combat. Williams had been analyzing their ammunition supplies and equipment condition after 3 days of movement through hostile territory, calculating their capability to fight through opposition if the extraction zone proved to be another trap. Sir, we've got enough ammunition for 1 significant engagement, maybe 2 if we're careful. After that, we're down to hand-to-hand combat and improvised weapons. Rodriguez had been observing the terrain around their planned extraction zone and identified tactical problems that suggested someone with detailed knowledge of American extraction procedures had been involved in choosing the location. Sir, that landing zone is a natural kill zone. Overlapping fields of fire from multiple positions, limited cover for aircraft, restricted escape routes for personnel on the ground. Baker's communication equipment had been intercepting increasingly sophisticated coordination between the forces hunting them, revealing the extent to which their enemies understood American special operations procedures and capabilities. Commander, they know our standard operating procedures, our communication protocols, our extraction methods. Someone has given them complete access to classified operational information. Kozlov provided the intelligence that would determine their approach to what might be their final battle or their successful extraction to safety. The extraction zone is compromised, but I know the personnel who will be waiting there. Some are legitimate American forces who believe they are conducting a rescue operation. Others are part of the network that has been trying to eliminate you from the beginning. Kelly's analysis of their situation led him to a conclusion that none of them wanted to acknowledge, but all of them had been considering. Sir, we may have to fight American forces at the extraction zone. If some of them are compromised and others are legitimate, we'll have to make split-second decisions about who to trust and who to engage. Thompson had been monitoring multiple communication frequencies when he intercepted a transmission that provided critical intelligence about the forces waiting at their extraction zone. Sir, I'm picking up radio traffic that suggests the extraction team includes personnel who are not on any official deployment roster. Someone has inserted people into the operation who don't officially exist. Morrison faced the decision that would determine not only his team's survival, but the fate of intelligence that could expose treason at the highest levels of American government. Approach the extraction zone and risk walking into a trap set by their own people, or attempt to find alternative routes to safety that would take weeks and might never succeed. Santos had been considering their tactical options when he made an observation that provided a potential solution to their impossible situation. Sir, if Overwatch can provide accurate intelligence about personnel at the extraction zone, we might be able to identify legitimate American forces and coordinate with them to neutralize the compromised elements. Mitchell had been preparing the intelligence files that represented months of dangerous work and the evidence needed to expose the treason network when she made a decision that would affect everything that followed. If we can't trust the official extraction, then we need to get this intelligence to people outside the normal chain of command. I have contacts in other agencies who aren't part of this network. Kozlov provided the final piece of information that would determine their approach to the extraction zone and potentially their survival. I have been in communication with legitimate American intelligence personnel who are aware of the treason network and have been working to expose it. They will be at the extraction zone, but so will the people trying to eliminate all witnesses to their activities. Morrison realized that the final phase of their mission would require them to fight alongside a Ukrainian operative who had every reason to distrust American intelligence while distinguishing between legitimate American forces and traitors who were willing to kill American personnel to protect their crimes. As they prepared for their approach to the extraction zone, Morrison understood that the next few hours would determine not only whether his team survived, but whether evidence of treason that had cost American lives would see justice or be buried forever in the mountains of Afghanistan. The sound of approaching helicopters echoed off the mountain walls as dawn broke over what would either be their rescue or their final battle. But for the first time in days, Morrison felt something approaching confidence as he prepared to lead his team toward an uncertain fate, knowing that they carried truth worth dying for and were guided by an ally whose commitment to justice had been proven through months of solitary war against forces that had betrayed everything he had once served. The final approach to the extraction zone began with the understanding that some of the hardest fighting they would face would be against people wearing the same flag they had sworn to defend. but that victory would mean more than just survival. It would mean justice for all the personnel who had died because of betrayal by their own government. In the end, the hidden sniper who had saved them had become more than an ally. He had become the instrument through which truth would finally triumph over treason in the shadow war that had been raging in the mountains of Afghanistan.